Mom, starting next month, you'll have to pay rent. For a second, I honestly thought my son was joking. 23 guests sat around the Christmas dinner table. Someone laughed, thinking it was a joke too. But Noah wasn't smiling. Neither was his wife. The Christmas music was still playing softly in the background. The turkey was still steaming. The candles were still burning. And somehow, the warmest night of the year suddenly became the coldest moment of my life. I looked at my son. The same little boy who once cried because he couldn't sleep unless I held his hand. Now, he couldn't even look me in the eyes. He cleared his throat. Mom, we've talked about this. It's only fair. Fair. Such a small word. Such a cruel one. I slowly placed my fork beside my plate. No shouting. No tears. No anger. Just silence. Because when you're 74 years old, you learn that silence often hurts more than screaming. Across the table, my 6-year-old grandson frowned. Daddy, why would Grandma pay to live with family? Nobody answered him. Because children ask questions. Adults are too ashamed to answer. I looked around the room. 23 people. Lawyers. Doctors. Business owners. Neighbors. Friends. Every one of them suddenly became fascinated by their dinner plates. Not one person said, "She can stay with us." Not one. That's when I realized something. Loneliness has nothing to do with being alone. You can feel completely abandoned while sitting in a room full of people. So, I smiled. Not because I was okay. Because I refused to let my grandson's last memory of me be one of humiliation. I stood up carefully. My niece protested. Age always collects its debts. I think I should get my suitcase. Noah finally looked up. His lips parted slightly, as though some part of him wanted to stop me. But pride is a terrible prison. He said nothing. Neither did I. I walked upstairs, opened the old closet, and picked up the same brown suitcase my husband had bought for me 27 years earlier. Inside, there wasn't much. A Bible, 2 sweaters, 1 family photograph, my late husband's pocket watch, and a sealed envelope. I held it in my hands for several seconds, then quietly smiled. "They're finally going to need you," I whispered. Because inside that envelope was one truth capable of destroying everything my son believed he owned. The beautiful house. The one glowing beneath thousands of Christmas lights. The one everyone admired. Had never belonged to him. Not for a single day. Before you decide my son was a cruel man, you should know who he used to be. Because the little boy I raised would have fought the whole world just to protect me. He wasn't born selfish. He wasn't born ungrateful. Life changed him. One small decision at a time. 40 years earlier, Christmas looked very different. Our home wasn't beautiful. The roof leaked every winter. The kitchen floor creaked with every step. And if the wind blew hard enough, the windows rattled all night long. But to 8-year-old Noah, it was a castle. Every December, he'd wake up before sunrise and run into our bedroom shouting, "Mom! Dad! Santa's coming tonight." Michael would pretend to groan. "Already?" I haven't even finished teaching the reindeer where we live. Noah would laugh so hard he'd fall onto the bed between us. Those laughs. They healed every worry we carried. Even the ones we never spoke about. Money was painfully tight. Michael had injured his back at the factory. The doctors told him he needed surgery. The factory told him they needed someone who could actually work. By the end of the month, he no longer had a job. I still remember the night we counted the money on the kitchen table. $43. That was everything we had. $43. To feed a family. To pay the electricity bill. To survive until next payday. Michael quietly rubbed his face. I'm sorry, Ellie. Those words broke my heart. Because he believed he'd failed us. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You came home. That's all Noah cares about. He looked at me. And you? I smiled. I married the man. Not the paycheck. For the first time that week. He laughed. 3 days before Christmas. Noah burst through the front door carrying a colorful school flyer. Mom. You have to see this. Every child in his class had written a Christmas wish. Teachers planned to hang them on the classroom wall. I unfolded the paper. At the top. In his messy little handwriting. It read, Dear Santa, I know you're busy this year, but if you have one red bicycle left, could you please bring it to me? If not, that's okay, you can give it to another kid who needs it more. I stopped reading. Not because the letter had ended. Because my eyes had filled with tears. Michael quietly took the paper from my hands. Neither of us spoke. A bicycle cost more than 3 months of groceries. It wasn't impossible. It was worse than impossible. That night. After Noah fell asleep. Michael whispered, We'll tell him Santa couldn't make it this year. I looked toward the hallway where our little boy was sleeping. No. Michael sighed. We don't have a choice. I stood up. Walked into our bedroom. Opened the old wooden jewelry box my mother had given me on our wedding day. Inside lay my wedding ring. I held it under the bedroom light. It wasn't expensive. But it had witnessed every promise we'd ever made. Michael followed me. The moment he saw the ring in my hand, he shook his head. No. Ellie. Please don't. I smiled through my tears. It's only a ring. He stepped closer. No. It stopped being just a ring. The day I placed it on your finger. Silence filled the room. Then I gently closed his hand around it. Do you know what this ring really means? He looked at me. It means, no matter what happens, we choose each other. I took the ring back. And tomorrow, I'm choosing our son. The next morning, I walked into a pawn shop wearing a smile. And walked out trying not to cry. An hour later, there was a bright red bicycle hidden in our neighbor's garage. Waiting for Christmas morning. I told myself losing the ring didn't matter. Because one day, when Noah became a man, he'd understand what his parents had done for him. I believed that with all my heart. I just never imagined that life would test that belief in the cruelest way possible. Because before the next Christmas arrived, my husband would tell me something that would change the rest of my life forever. Have you ever noticed how life can change between one heartbeat and the next? One moment, Michael was laughing because Noah had accidentally painted our old fence blue instead of white. The next, he was lying in a hospital bed, trying to convince me he was going to be okay, even though we both knew he wasn't. The doctor didn't waste time. I wish I had better news. Those words were enough. I didn't need to hear the rest. Cancer. Advanced. Aggressive. Treatment could slow it down, but it couldn't stop it. I felt my knees weaken. Michael reached over and quietly squeezed my hand. "Hey," he whispered. "Don't cry." I forced a smile. "I'm not crying." He smiled back. "You've always been a terrible liar." Even then, he was still trying to make me laugh. That was the kind of man he was. The months that followed felt like running through a storm that never ended. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5, pack Noah's lunch, walk him to school, work an 8-hour shift at the grocery store, spend the evening at the hospital, then clean offices until midnight. When I finally got home, I'd sit on the edge of Noah's bed, watching him sleep. Some nights, I cried so quietly, even the walls couldn't hear me, because I had made myself one promise. No matter how scared I became, my son would never carry my fear. Children deserve childhood, not their parents' burdens. One afternoon, Noah walked into Michael's hospital room carrying a tiny plastic toolbox. "Dad, I brought this." Michael smiled. "What's that for?" "So you can fix yourself." The room fell silent. The nurse quietly turned away. I bit my lip so hard it bled. Michael pulled Noah onto the bed beside him. "I wish it worked like that, buddy." Noah frowned. "It can. Because you always fix everything." Michael hugged him tightly. "I hope you never lose that kind of faith." A week later, I found Michael staring out the hospital window. The sun was setting. Golden light filled the room. He looked peaceful. Almost too peaceful. "Ellie, I need you to promise me something." I immediately shook my head. "No. I'm not making goodbye promises." He smiled gently. "Please." I sat beside him. He took a long breath. "If I don't make it, don't let Noah spend his life blaming himself." I frowned. "Why would he?" "Because children always think they could have loved us more." His words hit me harder than anything the doctor had said. Then he looked straight into my eyes. "And don't let him grow up believing money matters more than people. Teach him that success means nothing if the people who love you no longer feel welcome in your home." I nodded through my tears. "I promise." He smiled, closed his eyes, and whispered one final sentence. "The greatest inheritance we leave our children is not a house. It's our heart." 3 days later, he was gone. The funeral took place on a cold winter morning. Snow fell so softly. It looked as though heaven itself had decided to whisper instead of speak. Noah stood beside me, holding my hand with both of his. He didn't cry. Not once. Children sometimes become strangely quiet when their hearts are breaking. As everyone slowly walked away, he looked up at me. "Mom." I knelt beside him. "Yeah, sweetheart." He swallowed hard. "Who's going to teach me how to shave now?" My heart shattered. But I smiled. I will. But you're a girl. I'll learn. What about fishing? I'll learn. What about fixing bikes? I'll learn. What about being a dad? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I wrapped both arms around him. I can't replace your father. But I promise you this. You will never face this world alone. He hugged me with all the strength his little body had. I love you, Mom. I love you more. At that moment, standing beside Michael's grave, I truly believed love was enough to protect a family forever. I didn't know that one day, the little boy who begged me never to leave him would become the man who asked me to leave. And when that day finally came, the promise I made beside my husband's grave would be the only reason I found the strength to smile. People don't lose their values in one dramatic moment. It happens quietly. One compromise. One excuse. One decision they promise themselves will only happen once. I wish I had recognized the first warning. Maybe everything that came later could have been different. 10 years passed. Noah was 18 now. Tall. Confident. With his father's blue eyes. And a smile that still made me forget every difficult day we'd survived. He was the pride of our small town. His teachers admired him. Neighbors talked about his future. Even strangers remembered his name. That Brooks boy. He's going places. Every time I heard those words, my heart smiled. Because I knew exactly how much his father had sacrificed to make that future possible. Our life wasn't easy. But it was peaceful. I still worked 2 jobs. The grocery store during the day. Cleaning offices 3 nights a week. Some mornings, my hands hurt so much. I struggled to button my own coat. I never complained. Pain feels lighter when it's carrying someone you love. One Saturday afternoon, Noah found me asleep at the kitchen table. My work uniform was still on. Bills were scattered across the table. My reading glasses had slipped off my face. I felt someone gently place a blanket over my shoulders. When I opened my eyes, he was standing there. You should be resting. I smiled. I will. When? I looked around the kitchen. After life slows down. He walked over and hugged me. One of those long hugs. The kind children stop giving when they become adults. I promise. One day, you'll never have to work again. I believed him. Not because he promised. Because I trusted the heart that made the promise. A few months later, Noah received a letter. He had earned a place at one of the best architecture schools in the state. We celebrated with frozen pizza, store-brand soda, and a chocolate cake that leaned slightly to one side. It was the happiest dinner we'd had in years. Until the tuition estimate arrived. I read the number 3 times. Surely it had to be a mistake. It wasn't. Even with scholarships, we couldn't afford it. That night, I quietly cried in the bathroom so Noah wouldn't hear me. How could I tell my son that the future he'd worked so hard for cost more than we could ever save? The following Monday, Noah came home unusually excited. Mom, I found a solution. I looked up from the sink. What is it? My friend Tyler knows someone. Someone? He can help students get extra financial aid. Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. What kind of help? He hesitated. Just changing a few numbers on the application. The room went completely silent. I slowly dried my hands. Then looked directly into his eyes. No. It's not hurting anyone. No. Everyone does it. Noah. It's just paperwork. I walked over until we were standing face to face. Then I placed both hands on his shoulders. When your father was dying, do you know what he worried about? He looked down. No. He wasn't worried about money. He wasn't worried about the house. He wasn't worried about his own life. He was worried that one day, you might forget the difference between success and integrity. Noah didn't speak. His eyes filled with tears. I just wanted to make things easier for you. I smiled sadly. My sweet boy. If you build your future on a lie, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering when it will collapse. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he reached into his backpack, pulled out the application, and tore it into tiny pieces. I'm sorry, Mom. I hugged him. So am I. But today, you became richer than you realize. A week later, I made a decision no one ever found out about. I sold the last piece of land Michael had inherited from his father. It wasn't much. Just a small empty lot on the edge of town. But it held memories. Michael had always dreamed of building a little workshop there. A place where he could teach Noah woodworking. That dream ended the day cancer entered our lives. I signed the papers without telling Noah. The money, combined with his scholarships, was finally enough. When I handed him the university acceptance packet, he looked confused. I thought we couldn't afford this. I smiled. Life has a funny way of opening doors. He hugged me so tightly. I almost told him the truth. But I didn't. Parents have a habit of hiding their sacrifices. Not because they want credit, but because they don't want their children carrying guilt. The night before he left for college, we sat together on the front porch. Neither of us said much. The crickets filled the silence. Finally, he looked at me. Mom, aren't you scared? Of what? Being alone. I looked toward the stars. I've never been alone. I still have your father. He frowned. But he's gone. I smiled. No. As long as someone remembers your laugh, you never really leave. He looked at me for a long moment. Then quietly asked, do you think Dad would be proud of me? I answered without hesitation. He already is. Noah smiled. But neither of us knew that college wouldn't just change his future. It would introduce him to the woman who would slowly convince him that success was measured by square footage, luxury cars, and bank accounts. Not by promises. Not by sacrifice. And certainly not by the people waiting for him back home. The little boy who once cried because he couldn't bear to leave his mother was about to begin walking down a road that would eventually lead him back to one Christmas night where he'd ask her to leave instead. College didn't change Noah. Not at first. He still called every Sunday. Sometimes he'd tell me about difficult professors. Sometimes about late-night study sessions. Sometimes he'd ask me for my apple pie recipe because none of the cafeteria desserts tasted like home. Those phone calls became my favorite part of every week. I'd clean the house before he called. Put fresh flowers on the kitchen table. Make myself a cup of tea. As though he were coming home. Instead of simply calling. That's what mothers do. We celebrate the smallest moments. Because we know they don't last forever. One afternoon, about halfway through his second year, my phone rang. Mom. I met someone. I smiled before he could say another word. I was wondering when you'd finally tell me. He laughed. How did you know? Because your voice sounds different. Different how? Happier. There was a long silence. Then he quietly admitted, I think she's special. I looked toward the old family photograph sitting on my bookshelf. Michael smiled back at me from inside the frame. I wish you were here, I whispered. Her name was Victoria Collins. She studied interior design. She was intelligent, elegant, ambitious. The kind of woman who always knew exactly what she wanted. The first time I met her, she hugged me politely. It is so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Brooks. Please. I've earned every gray hair I have. Call me Eleanor. She laughed. It was a beautiful laugh. Warm. Confident. Almost impossible to dislike. That afternoon, I cooked every dish Noah had loved as a little boy. Roast chicken. Mashed potatoes. Homemade bread. Apple pie. Victoria complimented everything. This is the best meal I've had all year. My heart relaxed. Maybe. Just maybe. God had answered my prayers. After dinner, she wandered through the house, looking carefully at every room. She stopped beside an old bookshelf Michael had built with his own hands. Her fingers brushed across the worn wood. This furniture is very. She searched for the right word. Vintage. I smiled. It was handmade. She nodded politely. You should replace it someday. Replace it. I looked at the bookshelf. Every scratch carried a memory. Michael had built it the week Noah learned to read. He measured every shelf twice. Because he wanted enough space for all the books our son would one day own. I gently ran my hand across the wood. I don't think I ever could. Victoria smiled. She didn't argue. But I noticed something. She admired beautiful things. I treasured meaningful things. At the time, it felt like a harmless difference. I didn't realize. It was the beginning of two completely different ways of seeing the world. Over the next year, Victoria visited often. She always brought flowers. She always thanked me for dinner. She never forgot my birthday. Anyone watching from the outside would have called her the perfect future daughter-in-law. Maybe. She was trying to be. But every now and then, tiny moments slipped through the cracks. One evening, we were walking past an expensive neighborhood after dinner. Victoria stopped in front of a magnificent white house. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Stone pillars. Perfect landscaping. One of those homes people slow down to admire. She smiled. One day, I'm going to live in a house like this. Noah laughed. Then I guess I'd better become a very successful architect. She squeezed his hand. I'm serious. So am I. I watched them quietly. Young people dream. That's what they're supposed to do. There was nothing wrong with wanting a beautiful home. What worried me was the look in Victoria's eyes. She wasn't looking at a house. She was looking at a destination. As though happiness itself lived behind those front doors. Months later, Noah graduated at the top of his class. I had never been so proud. As he walked across the stage, accepting his diploma, I heard Michael's voice inside my heart. Asterisk, we did it, Ellie. Asterisk, asterisk, our little boy made it. Asterisk, that evening, Noah hugged me for a long time. Mom, everything I am, it's because of you. I smiled. No. It's because your father taught you to dream. And I simply tried to keep those dreams alive. He kissed my forehead. I'll spend the rest of my life making you proud. For just a second, I believed every word. 3 months later, he proposed to Victoria. She said yes. The wedding planning began almost immediately. One evening, Victoria spread magazines across my kitchen table. This venue is perfect. She pointed to a luxury country club. It costs. She hesitated. About $90,000. I almost dropped my teacup. 90,000? She smiled apologetically. I know it sounds like a lot. A lot. I laughed softly. My dear. Michael and I bought our first house for less than that. She laughed too. But no one didn't. He looked embarrassed. Later that night, as I washed the dishes, he quietly joined me. Mom, do you think she's asking for too much? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I dried my hands. Then looked at him. Tell me something. When you picture your wedding day, what do you remember? He frowned. It hasn't happened yet. I know. But close your eyes. He smiled. I see Victoria. Exactly. Not the flowers. Not the chairs. Not the price tag. Just the person. He nodded slowly. I never thought about it like that. I smiled. I hope you never stop thinking that way. Because deep inside, a fear I couldn't explain had begun to grow. Not because Victoria wanted a beautiful wedding, but because I wondered what would happen if one day beautiful things became more important than beautiful people. And life was about to answer that question. There is nothing wrong with wanting success. There is nothing wrong with dreaming of a beautiful home. The danger begins when you start believing a house is more valuable than the people who made it possible. I didn't know it then, but that lesson was about to cost us everything. The wedding was breathtaking. White roses. Soft candlelight. A string quartet played as guests took their seats. Victoria looked radiant. Noah looked like the happiest man alive. As I watched them exchange their vows, I reached into my purse. Inside was Michael's old pocket watch. I held it tightly and whispered, "We did it, Michael. Our little boy found someone to love." For a moment, I truly believed my hardest years were behind me. A year passed quickly. Noah found success. His designs attracted attention. New clients arrive every month. Victoria launched her own interior design studio. Together, they looked like the perfect couple. One Sunday afternoon, they invited me over for lunch. As soon as dessert was served, Victoria smiled. "We have some exciting news." I looked at Noah. His eyes sparkled. "We are buying our first home." I clapped my hands together. "Oh, that's wonderful." Victoria slid a glossy brochure across the table. It was a magnificent property. A white colonial house. Tall pillars. A wraparound porch. Large windows overlooking a beautiful garden. It looked like something from a movie. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Then I noticed the price. My smile faded. It was far beyond what they could comfortably afford. That evening, after Victoria left the room to answer a phone call, I quietly asked Noah, "Are you sure this is wise?" He looked away. "It'll be tight." "Then why not buy something smaller?" He sighed. "Victoria has dreamed about this house for years." I nodded slowly. Dreams matter. But so does peace. Son. Never buy something that forces you to sell your peace. He smiled politely. "I'll be okay, Mom." It was the first time. His smile didn't reach his eyes. A week later, the bank rejected their mortgage application. The down payment wasn't large enough. Their debt ratio was too high. The numbers simply didn't work. That night, my phone rang. It was Noah. His voice sounded defeated. "Mom, I think we lost the house." I closed my eyes. My heart broke for him. Not because of the house. Because I could hear the little boy inside his voice again. The one who once cried over a red bicycle. "I'll come over." When I arrived, Victoria was sitting silently at the dining table. Loan documents covered every inch of it. Noah looked exhausted. "We've tried every bank. No one will approve us." I quietly read through the paperwork. The problem wasn't impossible. It was just expensive. Very expensive. The next morning, without telling either of them, I visited the same bank. The loan officer recognized my name immediately. "Mrs. Brooks. You understand what's required?" "I do. You'll be risking nearly everything." "I know. If they default, you could lose your retirement." "I know." He looked at me for several seconds. Then gently asked, "Why would you do this?" I smiled. "Because 25 years ago, my husband trusted me with his greatest treasure. Our son. I'm simply protecting what's always belonged to us." The manager quietly nodded. No more questions were asked. I signed every document. Transferred every dollar from my retirement account. Used the last of my savings. Even pledged the small investment Michael and I had built over decades. By the time I walked out of the bank, my entire future was tied to one house. A house that wasn't even mine. Or so everyone believed. The bank's attorney stopped me before I left. "Mrs. Brooks. For your protection, we strongly recommend keeping the property title in your name until the loan obligations are fully satisfied." I frowned. "But the house is for my son." "It will be. This simply protects you." I hesitated. Then signed one final document. The attorney placed it into a sealed envelope. "Keep this somewhere safe." I slipped it into my handbag. never imagining that one piece of paper would one day become the most important document in our family's history. That evening, I visited the new house alone. The workers were still finishing the landscaping. I slowly walked through each empty room. The silence echoed. I stood in what would become the living room, closed my eyes, and imagined future Christmas mornings. Oliver, though he wasn't even born yet, running across these floors. Noah laughing. Victoria decorating the tree. Family photographs covering the walls. I smiled. This house will be filled with love, I whispered. Then I gently touched the wall and added, Michael, I hope you'd be proud. When the keys were finally handed over, Noah hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. We couldn't have done it without you. I smiled. You don't owe me anything. He laughed. When this house is completely paid off, I'm going to frame the deed and hang it in the hallway. I smiled. You should. Inside my heart, I thought, one day, I'll place that deed in your hands myself. It was supposed to be my final surprise. Instead, it would become the reason my son realized that the woman he asked to pay rent had quietly been carrying the weight of his dreams for years. And before that truth came to light, a little boy named Oliver would become the only person in that house who still understood what love really looked like. People think the greatest gift grandparents give their grandchildren is wisdom. They're wrong. The greatest gift is making them feel completely loved, without asking them to earn it. And if I'm being honest, I think grandchildren save grandparents far more often than grandparents save them. 2 years later, Oliver was born. The first time the nurse placed him in my arms, he wrapped his tiny fingers around my index finger. Exactly the way Noah had done 30 years earlier. I looked at his tiny face, then toward the hospital window. Michael, meet your grandson. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Not tears of sadness. Tears of gratitude. Life had given me another chance to hear little footsteps inside the home. As Oliver grew, Tuesday became our special day. Every Tuesday afternoon, I'd pick him up from school. The moment he spotted my old blue sedan, he'd sprint across the parking lot. Grandma Ellie. I always remind him, no running, sweetheart. But secretly, I hoped he'd never stop. Because one day, children grow up, and they stop running toward you. Our afternoons were beautifully ordinary. We baked chocolate chip cookies, built blanket forts in the living room, made pirate ships out of cardboard boxes. Sometimes, we'd sit on the porch feeding birds. He'd ask questions no adult would ever think to ask. Grandma, does Grandpa still know it's Christmas? I smiled. I think heaven celebrates every day. His eyes grew wide. Really? I hope so. Then Grandpa never has to wait for presents. I laughed so hard. The birds flew away. One rainy afternoon, Oliver opened an old wooden box in my closet. Inside were Michael's pocket watch, a faded baseball glove, and a tiny red bicycle bell. He picked it up. What does this go to? I smiled. A bicycle. Where's the bicycle? I looked out the window. It helped the little boy believe in magic. He frowned. What happened to it? The little boy grew up. Oliver thought for a moment. Then one day, when I'm big, I'll buy you another red bicycle. My heart melted. Children don't measure love by money. They measure it by smiles. Life, however, was becoming busier for Noah. His company expanded. He hired employees, won awards, appeared in local business magazines. Every success made me proud. But every success also stole a little more of his time. Sunday phone calls became monthly phone calls. Monthly phone calls became quick text messages. Sometimes weeks passed without hearing his voice. I never complained. Love shouldn't feel like a bill waiting to be paid. Victoria changed too. Not suddenly. Slowly. Almost invisibly. At first, she stopped staying for coffee. Then, she started checking her phone during dinner. Later, she began canceling family weekends because of client meetings. None of those things were terrible. But together, they quietly built a wall. One brick at a time. Then came the first moment that truly hurt. Oliver had drawn a picture at school. His teacher asked every child to draw the people who make you feel safe. He proudly handed it to me. There were 4 smiling stick figures. Oliver, his mom, his dad, and me. Above us, he had drawn Michael as an angel, watching over our family. I kissed his forehead. It's beautiful. That evening, he proudly showed it to Victoria. She smiled. Then gently folded the paper. Sweetheart, you should draw our new house instead. Oliver looked confused. But this is my favorite picture. It's nice, she replied. But houses last longer than paper. I quietly looked away. She didn't understand. A house is just wood and stone. A child's drawing can become a family's greatest treasure. A few weeks before Christmas, Noah invited me over for dinner. As I arrived, I noticed contractors working in the backyard. A new swimming pool, outdoor lighting, luxury landscaping. Everything looked perfect. Maybe too perfect. During dinner, Victoria smiled. We're thinking about remodeling the upstairs. I laughed softly. It already looks brand new. She shrugged. Styles change. I looked around the dining room. Then at the old bookshelf Michael had built. The one Noah had insisted on bringing into this house. It still stood proudly against the wall. Worn. Scratched. Beautiful. I smiled. Some things never go out of style. Victoria smiled politely, but said nothing. That night, as I prepared to leave, Oliver hugged me tightly. Much tighter than usual. Grandma, can you stay tonight? I smiled. Not tonight, sweetheart. He looked disappointed. I always sleep better when you're here. Victoria laughed. That's because Grandma spoils you. Oliver shook his head. No. She makes the house feel warm. Everyone laughed. Except me. Because somehow, a 6-year-old had just said what every adult in that room had forgotten. A home isn't warmed by fireplaces. or expensive furniture, or beautiful decorations. It's warmed by the people who fill it with love. And before that Christmas was over, the warmest person in that house would be the one asked to leave. The saddest part? The only one who would truly understand what had been lost would be a 6-year-old little boy. People think a heart breaks with a loud sound. It doesn't. It breaks quietly, while the Christmas lights are still glowing, while children are still laughing, while everyone around you believes everything is perfectly fine. That's exactly how mine broke. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in fresh snow. The neighborhood looked like something from an old holiday movie. Children built snowmen. Neighbors exchanged gifts. Carolers sang beneath glowing streetlights. Inside Noah's house, everything was perfect. Or at least, it looked perfect. A 20-foot Christmas tree stood proudly in the living room. Crystal ornaments reflected the fireplace. The dining table was decorated with white roses, silver candles, and polished china. Victoria had spent weeks planning every detail. Every guest who walked through the front door said the same thing. This house is incredible. It feels like a magazine. You two have built an amazing life. Every compliment made Victoria smile. Every compliment made Noah stand a little taller. And every compliment reminded me how proud Michael would have been. By 6 o'clock, the house was full. Business partners, old college friends, neighbors, a local judge, a pediatrician, an elderly couple from church. 23 people in total. Everyone dressed in their finest clothes. Everyone carrying beautifully wrapped gifts. Everyone believing they were about to enjoy the perfect Christmas dinner. Oliver refused to leave my side. Grandma, come help me put the star on the tree. I laughed. You ask me every year. Because you're taller than me. No. I'm just older. He giggled. You can be both. I lifted him onto my shoulders. Slowly. Carefully. He placed the golden star on top of the tree. The entire room applauded. Oliver wrapped his arms around my neck. I love you, Grandma. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Victoria smiled politely. But I noticed something. She looked at the clock. Not at us. Dinner began. Turkey. Honey-glazed carrots. Mashed potatoes. Fresh bread. Pumpkin pie. The table looked beautiful. Conversation flowed easily. People laughed. Shared stories. Talked about vacations. Stock markets. New business opportunities. I mostly listened. Sometimes, the greatest luxury isn't speaking. It's simply having the people you love sitting around one table. Halfway through dinner, Oliver stood up. I made something. He disappeared upstairs. Moments later, he returned holding a folded piece of paper. It's for Grandma. He handed it to me proudly. I opened it slowly. It was another drawing. Me. Oliver. Noah. Victoria. Standing together beneath a huge Christmas tree. Above us, Michael floated among the clouds, smiling. At the bottom, Oliver had written in crooked letters, "Home is wherever Grandma is." My eyes instantly filled with tears. It's beautiful, I whispered. Everyone smiled. Even Victoria. For just a moment. Everything felt exactly the way Christmas should feel. I wish time had stopped there. A few minutes later, Victoria gently tapped her glass. The room became quiet. I'd like to thank everyone for spending Christmas Eve with us. Applause filled the room. She smiled warmly. This year has been unforgettable. Our business doubled. We renovated our dream home. And she looked toward Noah. We've made some important family decisions. Something inside me tightened. Noah slowly stood. He looked nervous. Very nervous. He rubbed his wedding ring with his thumb. A habit he'd inherited from his father whenever he felt anxious. For one hopeful second, I thought he was about to thank me. Maybe tell everyone how I'd helped them buy this home. Maybe share the sacrifices his father and I had made. Instead, he looked directly at me. Mom. His voice cracked. We need to talk. The room fell completely silent. I smiled gently. Of course, sweetheart. He swallowed hard. You've been staying with us for several weeks now. Yes. And I think. He paused. Looked briefly at Victoria. Then continued. If you're going to keep living here, I think it's fair that you contribute. I frowned. I'm sorry. He took one deep breath. You should start paying rent. Time stopped. The music continued playing. Someone's fork slipped onto a plate. The fireplace crackled softly. But inside me, everything became completely still. I searched my son's face, looking for a smile. A wink. Some sign that this was a terrible joke. There wasn't one. Oliver looked confused. Dad. Grandma already gives us cookies. A few guests smiled awkwardly. No one laughed. Victoria gently placed her hand on Noah's arm, as if encouraging him to continue. He lowered his eyes. It's not personal, Mom. We just think this is what's best. Not personal. Those two words hurt even more than pay rent. Because nothing is more personal than hearing your own child explain why you no longer belong. I slowly folded Oliver's drawing, placed it carefully inside my sweater pocket. Then I looked around the table. 23 faces. 23 witnesses. 23 people who suddenly found the mashed potatoes more interesting than an old woman losing her home. Not one voice spoke. Not one. I smiled. A calm, gentle, almost peaceful smile. If that's truly how you feel, I won't make this harder. I stood up slowly. My suitcase is already packed. Noah's head snapped upward. What? I nodded. When you reach my age, you learn to recognize when someone's heart has changed. So, I packed yesterday. His face turned pale. You knew? I looked at him with tears that refused to fall. A mother always knows when she's no longer being invited to stay. Without another word, I turned toward the staircase. Each step echoed through the silent house. Behind me, no one called my name. No one stopped me. Except one tiny voice. Grandma. It was Oliver. Crying. Real crying. Not the loud kind. The heartbreaking kind. The kind children make When they don't understand why the people they love are leaving. And as I reached the top step, I whispered to myself, "Be strong, Eleanor. Because before this Christmas is over, the greatest secret you've carried for years will finally be revealed." People think the hardest part of being a mother is letting your child grow up. It isn't. The hardest part is watching them become someone you no longer recognize. I walked upstairs slowly. Every step felt heavier than the last. Not because I was carrying a suitcase. Because I was carrying 40 years of memories. I opened the guest room door. It was spotless. The bed was neatly made. My slippers were lined up beside the nightstand. Everything looked exactly as it had the night before. Except this room no longer felt like mine. Maybe it never had. I placed my old brown suitcase on the bed. Inside, there wasn't much. 2 sweaters. A family photograph. My Bible. Michael's pocket watch. Oliver's Christmas drawing. And one sealed envelope. I held it in both hands. My fingers trembled. Not because I was afraid. Because I had promised myself this envelope would never be opened. Years earlier, after signing the final papers for the house, the attorney had looked at me and said, "Mrs. Brooks, just in case," I had stopped him. "There won't be a just in case. My son would never treat me that way." I truly believed it. With every piece of my heart. I slipped the envelope back into my bag. "Not yet," I whispered. "Maybe I'll never need you." For one final moment, I allowed myself to believe that Noah would come upstairs, knock on the door, apologize, tell everyone he'd made a terrible mistake. So I waited. 1 minute. Then 5. Then 10. The hallway remained silent. No footsteps. No knock. No voice saying, "Mom, please stay." Silence. Can answer questions words never could. Downstairs. Christmas music started playing again. Someone laughed. Glasses clinked together. Dinner continued. Life moved on. As if nothing important had happened. As if an old woman hadn't just packed her life into one suitcase. I quietly wiped away a tear. Not because they had asked me to leave. Because my grandson was downstairs. Trying to understand why adults sometimes hurt the people they claim to love. I carried my suitcase downstairs. Every conversation stopped. No one knew where to look. I smiled at each guest. "Thank you for sharing Christmas with my family." Several people quietly whispered, "Merry Christmas." Their voices were filled with guilt. But guilt never changes the past. Oliver suddenly ran across the room. He wrapped both arms around my legs. "No. You can't go." I knelt down with great difficulty. He was crying so hard. His tiny shoulders shook. I gently wiped away his tears. "Listen to me, sweetheart. When you grow up, I want you to remember something." He sniffled. "What?" "If someone has to choose between being right and being kind, always choose kind." He nodded. Though I knew he was too young to understand. One day, he would. Then I stood. Looked at Noah. He couldn't meet my eyes. Not even once. I walked over to him, reached into my handbag, and placed the sealed envelope into his hands. He looked confused. "What's this?" I smiled sadly. "I hope you never have to open it." Victoria frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I still believe the son I raised is somewhere inside you." Noah looked down at the envelope. "I don't understand." "You will. But not today." I turned toward the front door. Snow was falling harder now. The cold wind rushed inside as I opened it. Just before stepping outside, I looked back one final time. Not at the house. At my family. At Oliver. At Noah. At the Christmas tree. And quietly said, "I hope one day, when you look back on tonight, you remember. It wasn't the night you asked your mother to leave. It was the night you stopped seeing everything she had already given you." Then I walked away. The snow quickly covered my footprints, as though the world itself was trying to erase the pain. Christmas morning arrived. For me, it began in a small roadside motel. For Noah, it began with silence. Oliver refused to open a single present. "I don't want toys," he whispered. "I want Grandma." No amount of wrapping paper could fill the empty chair beside the fireplace. No amount of expensive decorations could make the house feel warm. Then, at exactly 9 o'clock, a black luxury sedan slowly pulled into the driveway. A tall man stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. He rang the doorbell once, twice, then introduced himself. "Good morning. My name is Richard Hayes. I'm the attorney representing Mrs. Eleanor Brooks." Noah frowned. "My mother?" Richard nodded. "Yes. I've come to deliver something she prayed I would never have to bring." And with those words, everything Noah believed about his beautiful home was about to change forever. There are moments in life that divide everything into two parts. The life you lived before, and the life you live after. For Noah, that moment arrived. At exactly 9:03 on Christmas morning, Richard Hayes stepped inside. He removed his coat carefully, as though he understood. He wasn't entering the house. He was entering the middle of a family's heartbreak. The room was silent. Even Oliver stopped crying. Richard placed his leather briefcase on the dining table, then looked directly at Noah. "Mr. Brooks, I need to ask you one question." Noah nodded. "Yesterday evening, did your mother leave this home of her own free will?" Noah swallowed. His voice barely escaped. "Yes." Richard looked at him for several seconds, then quietly asked, "Or was she asked to leave?" Nobody answered. Victoria stared at the floor. Oliver looked between the adults, trying to understand. Finally, Noah whispered, "I told her if she wanted to keep living here, she should pay rent." Richard slowly closed his eyes, almost as if he had hoped the answer would be different. He opened the briefcase. Inside were several neatly organized folders. One by one, he placed them on the table. "This property," he said calmly, "was purchased 7 years ago." Noah nodded. "Correct. The mortgage application." The retirement guarantee. The down payment. The legal title. They all carry the same name. Richard slid the top document across the table. Eleanor Brooks. Noah frowned. There has to be a mistake. There isn't. My bank approved everything. Richard nodded. They approved it. Because your mother risked everything she owned. Another document appeared. A bank statement. Then another. Retirement withdrawals. Investment accounts. Life savings. Every page carried the same signature. Eleanor Brooks. Richard looked at Noah. Your mother emptied every retirement account she had. She sold investments. She accepted personal liability. If this mortgage had failed, she would have lost nearly everything. Victoria covered her mouth. No. Richard continued. Without Mrs. Brooks, this home would never have been approved. Noah's breathing became uneven. Images flashed through his mind. His mother's old winter coat. The worn shoes she refused to replace. The vacations she never took. The birthdays when she always insisted. I don't need anything. She hadn't been saving money. She had been saving him. Oliver tugged gently on his father's sleeve. Daddy. Grandma bought our house. Noah couldn't answer. His throat had closed. Richard answered softly instead. Yes. She gave your family a home. Oliver looked toward the empty chair beside the fireplace. Then quietly whispered, why did we make her leave? No one spoke. Because no sentence in the English language could make that answer hurt any less. Richard reached into the briefcase one final time. This time, he removed a thick cream-colored envelope. Its edges had yellowed with age. Across the front, written in Eleanor's careful handwriting, were 8 words. Only open if I ever leave my home. Noah stared at it. His hands refused to move. Richard placed it gently in front of him. Your mother wrote this the same day she signed the house papers. She made me promise that I would never deliver it unless she was no longer welcome here. Victoria began crying. Real tears. Not quiet embarrassment. Not guilt. Grief. Because she suddenly realized this envelope had been waiting for years. Waiting for one terrible decision. Waiting for Christmas Eve. Noah slowly picked it up. His fingers shook so badly. He almost dropped it. Inside was a handwritten letter. And something else. A small silver key. The key to the old wooden box where Eleanor had kept every memory of Michael. Every photograph. Every birthday card. Every drawing Noah had ever made. Every Father's Day note. Every school report. Every tiny piece of a childhood his mother had quietly protected. Richard looked at Noah and said, your mother told me. If this letter is ever opened, my son has already lost something far more valuable than a house. Noah's tears finally fell. Not slowly. Not quietly. They came all at once. Like 30 years of love, breaking through a wall of pride. He looked toward the front door. The same door his mother had walked through less than 12 hours earlier. He whispered only 4 words. I have to find her. Richard nodded. You should. He paused. Then added the sentence. that Noah would remember for the rest of his life. But don't waste another minute. Some apologies arrive after the person who needed them is already gone. The room fell silent. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, for the first time, that magnificent house didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a monument, built from one mother's sacrifices. And Noah finally understood. He had never owned the house. He had only been living inside his mother's love. The question now was, would he find her before it was too late? Noah stared at the letter for several seconds. He couldn't bring himself to unfold it. His hands trembled. Not because he was afraid of what it said, but because he was afraid of what it would make him remember. Finally, he opened it. At the very top, in neat blue handwriting, were 5 simple words. My sweet little boy, not, dear Noah, not, to my son, just, my sweet little boy. The moment he read those words, 30 years disappeared. He wasn't a successful architect anymore. He wasn't a husband. He wasn't a homeowner. He was 8 years old again, standing beside a bright red bicycle, believing his parents could do anything. He began reading. My sweet little boy, if you're reading this letter, then something happened that I prayed would never happen. I don't know what was said. I don't know who was right. I only know one thing. If this envelope has been opened, then somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other with love. Noah wiped his eyes. The tears kept coming. He continued. You may be wondering why the house remained in my name. It wasn't because I didn't trust you. It was because I trusted life even less. Life has a way of surprising us. Good people lose jobs. Businesses fail. Marriages face storms. I simply wanted one place on this earth that no bank could ever take away from you. Victoria quietly covered her face. 4 years. She had believed Eleanor kept control of the house. Now she realized Eleanor had only been trying to protect them. Noah turned the page. His breathing became uneven. Do you remember your red bicycle? You thought Santa brought it. He didn't. Your father and I sold my wedding ring. Not because bicycles mattered, but because your smile did. We never regretted it. Not for a single day. Noah closed his eyes. He remembered that bicycle. Every scratch. Every race. Every summer afternoon. He had treasured it for years. Yet, he had never asked where it came from. He kept reading. After your father died, I promised him something. I promised that our son would never feel alone. Every extra shift I worked, every meal I skipped, every coat I refused to replace, every dollar I saved, was simply another way of keeping that promise. The room fell silent. Even the fireplace seemed quieter. Richard stood motionless. He had delivered many legal documents during his career. None had ever felt this heavy. Then Noah reached the final page. The words blurred through his tears. He read them anyway. Last night, when you asked me to pay rent, my heart didn't break because you wanted money. My heart broke because for the first time, you looked at me and couldn't see your mother. You only saw someone taking up space. Victoria began sobbing. Oliver climbed onto her lap. Confused. Scared. He gently touched her face. Mommy. Why are you crying? She couldn't answer. Because how do you explain to a 6-year-old that adults sometimes forget the people who love them first? The last paragraph was short. Very short. Noah. If you're reading this, please don't waste today crying for me. Spend it becoming the man your father believed you could be. Love your wife. Hold your son. Be kind. And one day, when Oliver is old enough, tell him about the grandmother who loved him more than words could ever say. That's all I've ever wanted. Love always. Mom. Noah couldn't hold the letter anymore. It slipped from his fingers onto the floor. He dropped to his knees. His shoulders shook. His voice cracked. I became the very man Dad warned me about. No one tried to comfort him. Some pain must be felt completely before healing can begin. Richard quietly looked at his watch, then reached into his coat pocket. Oh, I almost forgot. Everyone looked up. Mrs. Brooks asked me to give you this, but only after you finish reading. He placed a small folded receipt on the table. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Until Noah read the date. December 22. 35 years ago, **** item purchased, 1 red bicycle, payment method, 1 gold wedding ring, attached to the receipt was a faded handwritten note from Michael. ***, if this bicycle ever breaks, I'll buy him another one, ***, if my heart breaks, Ellie will put it back together. Noah broke down completely. Not because of the receipt. Because he realized his parents had never measured wealth by what they own. Only by what they were willing to give away. And for the first time in his life, he understood that the richest family in town had never been the one with the biggest house. It had been the tiny family, living in the little house with the leaking roof, where love had always been enough. Then Noah stood up, grabbed his coat, and looked at Richard. Where is she? Richard smiled gently. This time, I think you're finally asking the right question. And together, they hurried out into the falling snow. Because somewhere, an old mother was spending Christmas alone, completely unaware that her little boy was finally coming home. Snow continued falling as Noah drove through the quiet streets. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deadlines, or clients, or money. He had only one thought. Fine, Mom, Richard. He asked from behind the steering wheel. Why didn't you tell me sooner? The attorney looked out the window. Because she wouldn't let me. What? She made me promise. If you ever treated her badly, I wasn't allowed to defend her. Noah frowned. Why? Richard smiled sadly. She said, if my son remembers who he is, he'll come back because of love, not because of legal papers. Noah gripped the steering wheel tighter. Even now, after everything, she was still protecting him. Their first stop was Eleanor's favorite church. Empty. Then the small park where she often fed birds. Only fresh snow remained. Then the grocery store where she had worked for 23 years. Closed for Christmas. Every place held memories. None held Eleanor. Back at the house, Oliver sat beside the Christmas tree. He refused to touch a single present. Victoria quietly knelt beside him. "Sweetheart, would you like to open just one gift?" He shook his head. "Christmas isn't Christmas without Grandma." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She hugged him tightly. For the first time in years, she realized something. She had spent thousands of dollars decorating a perfect Christmas. But the person who made it feel like Christmas couldn't be bought. Meanwhile, Noah remembered something. Richard. The motel. What motel? The little one on Highway 14. When Dad died, Mom stayed there one night. Because she couldn't bear going home alone. Richard turned toward him. "Drive." 10 minutes later, they pulled into the small roadside motel. The neon sign flickered in the cold. Half the parking lot was empty. The manager looked up as they entered. "Can I help you?" Noah showed him an old family photo. "Have you seen this woman?" The manager smiled gently. "Yes. She checked in last night." Noah's heart stopped. "Which room?" "I'm sorry. I can't give out guest information." Richard quietly showed his identification. "I'm her attorney." The manager hesitated. Then nodded. "Room 12. Noah almost ran. His footsteps echoed along the narrow hallway. He reached the faded blue door. Raised his hand. And froze. For the first time since he was a little boy, he was afraid. His mother might not answer. He knocked softly. Nothing. He knocked again. Still nothing. His breathing became faster. "Mom. It's me." Silence. Richard looked worried. "Try again." This time, Noah knocked harder. "Mom. I'm so sorry. Please. Please open the door." Inside, a chair scraped gently across the floor. The lock clicked. The door opened. Just a few inches. Eleanor stood there. Still wearing the same sweater. Still holding her old Bible. She looked tired. But peaceful. As though she'd already accepted that some wounds never heal. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Noah whispered the words he should have said the night before. "I'm here to take you home." Eleanor looked into his eyes. Really looked. She saw the tears. The trembling hands. The little boy. Hidden beneath the man. But instead of stepping forward, she quietly asked, "Which home, Noah? The one with the expensive walls? Or the one we used to build together?" Noah couldn't answer. Because for the first time, he understood. A house and a home had never been the same thing. And before his mother made her final decision, there was one truth she needed him to say aloud. Not for her. For himself. There are two kinds of forgiveness. The first comes from the lips. The second comes from the heart. The first one is easy to say. The second can take a lifetime to earn. As Noah stood outside that tiny motel room, he prayed. His mother still had enough love left to give him the second. Neither of them spoke. Snow drifted quietly behind Noah. The hallway was silent. Finally, he fell to his knees. Not because someone told him to. Because his heart could no longer carry the weight of his shame. "I'm sorry." The words barely escaped. "I forgot who I was." Tears streamed down his face. "I forgot who you were. I forgot what Dad taught me." Eleanor looked down at her son. For the first time in decades, the successful architect, the respected businessman, had disappeared. Only her little boy remained. The same little boy who once cried because he was afraid of the dark. She slowly knelt beside him. Her aging knees trembled. But she didn't care. She gently placed one hand against his cheek. "My sweet boy. You never had to earn my love. You only had to remember it." Noah buried his face against her shoulder. "I'm so ashamed. I know. I don't deserve you." She smiled softly. No child ever stops deserving their mother. Richard quietly stepped back. Some moments belong only to family. A black SUV suddenly pulled into the motel parking lot. The door opened. Victoria climbed out first. Oliver jumped out before the vehicle had even stopped. "Grandma." He ran as fast as his little legs could carry him. Eleanor opened her arms. He crashed into them with all his strength. "I found you," he cried. "I told Mommy. We had to bring you home." She kissed the top of his head. "I miss you too, my little angel." Victoria walked forward slowly. She wasn't wearing makeup anymore. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She stopped a few feet away, unable to meet Eleanor's eyes. "I'm sorry." No response came. Victoria continued. "I spent years building a beautiful house. And somehow, I forgot to build a beautiful family. I thought expensive things made people successful. But yesterday, when you walked out that door, I realized you were the heart of our home." Her voice broke completely. "If you can ever forgive me, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life becoming someone worthy of this family." Eleanor quietly walked toward her. Then, without saying a single word, she hugged her. Victoria collapsed into tears. Real tears. The kind that wash pride away. Oliver looked up at everyone. His innocent little face was full of confusion. "So, does this mean Christmas can start now?" Everyone laughed through their tears. Even Richard smiled. A week later, the entire family gathered back at the house. This time, not for decorations. Not for business. Not for appearances. For each other. The Christmas tree was still standing. Most of the presents remained unopened. Oliver carried one small gift toward Eleanor. "It's from me." She carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a tiny silver bicycle ornament. Attached to it, a handwritten note. For the grandma who gave everyone a ride home. She couldn't hold back her tears. After dinner, Noah stood in the living room, holding the house deed. Every family member watched silently. He slowly walked toward Eleanor. "This house has always been yours." she smiled. No. He shook his head. It was never about ownership. It was about love. Then, in front of everyone, he tore up the framed copy of the ownership certificate. Richard immediately laughed. The legal copy is safely filed. Everyone smiled. Noah continued. Today, we are creating something better than paperwork. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small brass plaque. Together, he and Oliver mounted it beside the front door. It read, ##Brooks Family Home ####, no one who is loved here, #### will ever have to earn their place. Eleanor covered her mouth. Michael's words echoed inside her heart. Success means nothing if the people who love you no longer feel welcome in your home. At last, his lesson had come home. Years later, visitors often asked about the little brass plaque beside the front door. Oliver, now a grown man, always smiled before answering. My grandmother made us put it there. Then he'd quietly add, no. Actually, she made us understand why it belongs there. And every Christmas Eve, before anyone opened a single gift, the Brooks family gathered in the living room. Oliver's children climbed onto Grandma Eleanor's lap. Noah read the old letter one more time. Victoria placed fresh flowers beneath Michael's photograph. And together, they thanked God. Not for the house. Not for success. Not for money. But for the woman who taught them that a home is never built with bricks. A home is built by the people who refuse to stop loving each other. If this story touched your heart, call your mother. Visit your father. Hug your grandparents. Because one day, you wish for one more conversation. One more Christmas. One more chance to say, thank you for loving me before I knew how to love you back.